Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our first event on Zoom as At Home with 4 Indies. We've put together 67 events since lockdown began. This is our first event on Zoom, so we're really, really pleased that you all can join us. The At Home with 4 Indies group of booksellers from across the UK are Carrie from Booker Bookshop in Oswestry, Helen from Forum Books in Corbridge, and Sue from Lingham's in Heswell. My name's Emma, and I'm joining you from Bookish in Crickhowell. So I just wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping points before we get started. Firstly, your books, they're with me at the moment, and hoping in the next couple of days we can arrange for Rachel to pop over and dedicate and sign them. They'll then be posted out to you. Obviously, in the current pandemic, things are taking a little bit longer than usual. If you're joining us from outside the UK, because I know that we've got a couple of people that have signed on from outside the UK, as this is the UK launch, if you can get in touch and just let us know, because we need to organise postage for outside the UK. Obviously there's other costs involved there, so please do get in touch. Now, for the event itself, the format will be Rachel's being interviewed this afternoon, so that'll be about half an hour. And then at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A speech bubble. If you click on that, you can type in your question and Rachel can pick which questions she'd like to answer. Hopefully we'll get round to lots of your questions. So without further ado, we are absolutely thrilled that you're able to join us this afternoon, and we are thrilled to be joined by Rachel Joyce. Now, it's the 23rd of July, and it is the publication day for Miss Benson's Beetle. Rachel is being interviewed by her husband, Paul Venables, this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming them both. Welcome, Rachel and Paul.
Hi,
thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Paul, and this is Rachel. And we're going to be here to talk about Miss Benson's Beetle today. We are married to each other, so I'm just going to hopefully have like an informal conversation with you, Rachel.
Yes.
About your writing process, and I want to ask you first how Miss Benson's Beetle emerged as an idea and how it developed over time, because I was around when you were writing the book, and I saw what you went through.
Yes.
Which was a lot of intense work,
yeah,
and a lot of going down one avenue and then coming back and going down another. So I'd like to hear how this came together, and for you to give us an outline of the general lines of the novel.
Okay.
Does that sound all right?
Yes, that does sound very, very good. Thank you, Paul, for your very good first
That was a good question.
Yes. So we could also just do a quick, I think everybody has seen it, but just to see that it shimmers, which I'm very, very proud of. So just so we know what we're talking about, Miss Benson's Beetle is the story of two women, Marjorie Benson and her assistant Enid Pretty, who leave 1950s Britain to travel to the other side of the world in search of a golden beetle that may or may not exist. So it started because, well, a few years ago now, I think, I began saying to you that I felt I didn't really know why I wasn't putting women at the centre of my writing, being one. And I kind of, why I wasn't celebrating what I feel is the power of women, especially when they come together. So I decided I wanted to write a book about female friendship. And then I kind of thought there are so many brilliant books about female friendship. I wanted to come at it from a slightly different angle. So that was when I got the idea of writing an adventure story for women. And I think it is unashamedly kind of, yes, madly, spectacularly, deeply an adventure story for women. So what we both did, in fact, was read a lot of
we found lots of adventure stories which were
yes.
all about men.
Yes.
And on the whole, and we just kind of looked at the way they were structured and what the man was put through.
Yes.
And we also watched kind of films about male friendships,
yes.
kind of buddy movies and things
yes.
like that,
yes,
to see
Yes.
what the kind of the general movements were in those stories.
Yes.
I mean, there was a couple that you really liked.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Butch Cassidy. I mean, that was, I love that. I love that. I think it's such a clever film. And I mean, the ending of it is so spectacular. I mean, I enjoyed the whole thing, but I think where it goes to, it's such a satisfying story.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think, how can we use this genre really for two women who wouldn't be the kind of women you would think would have this kind of adventure. That was my other starting point.
Yeah. I remember reading Rogue Mail, which was a very dark kind of adventure story for a man.
Visceral as well.
Yeah, it was very visceral, and I think you kind of you brought something of that into it in parts.
I did want to. Because in Rogue Mail you get a real sense of him being kind of underground and chased, and that kind of tension and hiding in burrows and holes he does, doesn't he? And then there are various people that you kind of know, you think you want to please don't let that person come back into the book.
Yeah.
So I had all that in mind when I was writing Miss Benson's Beetle.
So it's an adventure story, but it's centered around two women who are very, very different.
Yes.
Marjorie has had a disappointing life, a kind of.
Yes.
She's played by the rules and not really ended up winning.
No.
And Enid, the woman she goes on the journey with, is confident, kind of rather brassy.
Yeah.
And I suppose the question I was going to ask you was, those two characters, they're opposites, really.
Yes.
There's there's an introvert and an extrovert.
Yes. Where are we going? Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I told you this would be a probing interview.
Yeah, you did. You did. Yeah. Not that probing. Yes.
Yeah.
Go on. Yeah.
So, well, I wondered where they come up in you.
Yes.
What parts of you they kind of resonate with.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think I am probably quite a quiet person, but I think there's an extrovert part of me that would like to come out sometimes. But Marjorie, I think, is such an introvert, and she's so stuck in her ways because life has been quite hard on her. And also I was thinking because it's set in 1950, so there's still rationing going on in Britain, and it's quite a broken landscape, and there's not a lot of hope when people thought there would be hope. So she's ended up as a school teacher, even though her passion is beetles. And she really wants to find this golden beetle, which is on the other side of the world, that her father told her about when she was a girl. But life hasn't happened for her in that way, and she's been held back. She's been held back partly by men, I would say, and herself. Yes, I think she is that part of me that is a bit frightened and a bit, have to get it all right.
But then there's this opposite character,
who
is really not frightened of anything.
No. I think what was great about writing Enid Pretty, and I've no idea where that name came from, but she was so vivid in my mind. She was this kind of, blonde, petite, kind of just in a little kind of pink hat and a pink travel suit to go on safari, and way too much luggage. And she just has such an appetite for life. Yeah. I think she really loves it. She really wants to experience life. So they are opposites, and I think they're a bit like you and me sometimes. But obviously you don't.
I don't have a red travel case now.
No.
Well, I don't wear pencil skirts anymore.
No. There is also that. But apart from that, there is an element, I'm intrigued by what happens when you put an introvert and an extrovert together. And what I found was when I put these two women together, the kind of, it was an explosion that happened.
Well, yeah,
it was a very powerful book to write.
You're putting two chemicals together, aren't you?
Yes.
And you have this, then it causes a reaction.
Yes.
It's kind of alchemical.
Yes.
And that's what kind of happens in the relationship. The relationship blossoms into something that it couldn't be with just two separate elements.
No.
But I'm wondering whether you should read a little bit.
Yes.
Of the book, just to give people a flavour of.
To set the scene.
To set the scene.
Well, what I thought I'd do is read from the very beginning, because that way you haven't missed out on anything. And so this is chapter 1, and it's called The Golden Beetle of New Caledonia, 1914. When Marjorie was 10, she fell in love with a beetle. It was a bright summer's day and all the windows of the rectory were open. She had an idea about sailing her wooden animals across the floor 2 by 2, but the set had belonged to her brothers once, and most of them were either coloured in or broken. Some were even missing altogether. She was wondering if in the circumstances you could pair a 3-legged camel and a bird with spots when her father came out of his study. "Do you have a moment, old girl?" he said. "There's something I want to show you." So she put down the camel and the bird and she followed him. She would have stood on her head if he'd asked. Her father went to his desk. He sat there, nodding and smiling. She could tell he didn't have a proper reason for calling her. He just wanted her to be with him for a while. Since her 4 brothers had left for war, he often called her, or she'd find him loitering at the foot of the stairs, searching for something without seeming to know what it was. His eyes were the kindest in the world, and the bald top of his head gave him a naked look, like an egg. "I think I might have something that would interest you, old girl," he said. "Nothing much, but maybe you will like it." At this point, he would normally produce something he'd found in the garden, but instead he opened a book called Incredible Creatures. It looked important, like the Bible or an encyclopedia, and there was a general smell of old things, but that could well have been him. Marjorie stood at his side, trying hard not to fidget. The first page was a painted illustration of a man. He had a normal face and normal arms, but where his legs should have been, a green mermaid tail. She was amazed. The next picture was just as strange, a squirrel like one in the garden, but this had wings. And it went on, page after page, one incredible creature after another. "Well, well, look," her father kept saying. "Well now, goodness me, look at this chap, Marjorie." "Are they real?" "They might be." "Are they in a zoo?" "Oh no, dear heart, if these creatures live, they've not been found. There are people who believe they exist, but they haven't caught them yet, so they can't prove it." She had no idea what he was talking about. Until that moment, she'd assumed everything in the world was already found. It had never occurred to her things might happen in reverse, that you could see a picture of something in a book, that you could as good as imagine it, and then go off and look. Her father showed her the Himalayan yeti, the Loch Ness monster, the Patagonian giant sloth. There was the Irish elk with antlers as big as wings, the South African quagga, which started as a zebra until it ran out of stripes and became a horse, the great auk, the lion-tailed monkey, the Queensland tiger. So many incredible extra creatures in the world, and nobody had found a single one of them. "Do you think they're real?" she said. Her father nodded. "I have begun to feel comforted," he said, "by the thought of all we do not know, which is nearly everything." With that upside-down piece of wisdom, he turned another page. "Ah!" He pointed at a speck. A beetle. Well, how nothing this was, how small and ordinary. She couldn't see what it was doing in a book of incredible creatures, never mind whether it was not yet found. It was the sort of thing she would tread on and not notice. He told her the head of a beetle was called the head, the middle was the thorax, and the bottom half was the abdomen. Beetles had 2 pairs of wings. Did she know that? One delicate set that did the actual flying, and another hardened pair to protect the first. There were more kinds of beetle on God's earth than any other species, and they were each unique in remarkable ways. "He looks a bit plain," she said. Marjorie had heard her aunts call her plain, not her brothers though. They were handsome as horses. "Ah, but look." He turned to the next page, and her insides gave a lurch. Here the beetle was again, magnified about 20 times, and she had been wrong. She had been so wrong she could hardly believe her eyes. Close up, that small plain thing was not plain, not one bit. Oval in shape and gold all over, it was incandescent. Gold head, gold thorax, gold abdomen. Even its tiny legs were gold, as if nature had taken a bit of jewelry and made an insect instead. It was infinitely more glorious than a man with a tail. "The golden beetle of New Caledonia," said her father. "Imagine how it would be to find this one and bring it home."
Thank you. I was loving it.
Thank you.
It's really reminding me of when you were deciding whether you should choose a creature that could exist or
Yes.
something that was really, really
Yes.
very unusual, you know, like a Yeti kind of figure.
Yes, yes.
And you got,
Yes. Well, it began when I heard that program about cryptozoology.
yes,
Do you remember?
Yeah.
And it was on the news. It was the early morning news show, and there was this poor man being really roasted who was a cryptozoologist, and I didn't know what cryptozoology is, so in case nobody else does, it's the, as far as I understand it, it's the science, but it isn't accepted as a science, of searching for animals whose existence has not yet been proved. So,
which the golden beetle is one of those, I suppose.
It is one of those.
No one
yes.
knows that it exists.
No. Yes. Because originally I thought, well, I can't really write about the Loch Ness monster because that's just too big for me. But then I thought I was really interested in how you go about finding something that doesn't exist, but which is said to exist. Because that seems to me that then what you've got to work with is your imagination, faith, as well as knowledge, myth.
Yeah.
So that was sort of when we began talking about it.
Yeah.
And then originally, do you remember I thought it would be in the UK?
You were going to be in Cornwall or somewhere like that.
I think it was going to be, yes. And
I mean, that's something that I think is quite interesting
Yeah.
to talk about, where you were going to put the novel, because
Yes.
you've put the novel in a very far-flung place.
Yes,
You know, somewhere that you didn't know,
no,
somewhere completely out of your experience.
yeah.
Can you say more about that? What do you think
Yes.
was going on?
Well, I think what was going on, though, it's not always conscious at the time when you're writing, because I think sometimes you don't know why you're writing something, but you know you have to do it, or that's the way you have to go. And I think because I'd said to myself, this is an adventure story, I had to take it away from everything that I was comfortable with and everything that people would expect me to write. So I think if I'd come up with a book set in any part of the UK, nobody would have been that surprised. It wouldn't really have been an adventure for any of us. And so then I decided I would set it in France, which we have a relationship with, and I thought, well, I'd like to write about France. And then every time I put these two women sitting outside a boulangerie,
Yes.
I thought, well, I've read this.
Yeah.
I've definitely read this before. I've read it in very good places, but so again, I thought this is an adventure. So, and also, even if in 1950 it was quite easy, it was a little bit difficult to get to France, but it wasn't as difficult as crossing to the other.
As it's going to be soon.
Yes, it is quite difficult again now.
Yeah.
But when I was writing it, it seemed quite easy. So then I thought, well, this is an adventure story. It's an adventure for the women. It's an adventure for the reader. It's an adventure for me. So I have to go out of what I'm, away from what I'm comfortable with.
I remember looking at a big atlas.
Yes.
One of those that big atlas
Yes.
we've got, and just kind of going, well, where's really, really far away then?
Yes.
And then kind of going to the bit where it's mainly Pacific.
Yes.
And then just finding New Caledonia.
Yes. Yeah. And not knowing anything about it.
The other thing, I'm just remembering is suddenly when you started writing the book, and it often happens, I think, when you choose a subject, you start to notice beetles everywhere.
Yeah.
Beetles would kind of bang into windows, and you'd see beetle kind of emblems all over the place. And you suddenly realised how ubiquitous the emblem or the symbol of a beetle is.
Yes.
It's a very powerful symbol, I think.
It is. Well, it's a symbol of rebirth,
Yes,
isn't it?
it is.
Yeah. Which is what the book is about.
The book is about rebirth. I wanted to. I mean, there's a lot of. It's in a way, it's quite an epic novel. I mean, its scope is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, you get going from this kind of it's almost like the first bit of the book is in black and white.
Yes.
You see it starts in the First World War, and then you're in the 1950s, and it's post-war, and I know you did a massive amount of research on that period.
Yeah.
And what I was going to come on to now is one of the male figures in the book. There's a male figure in the book called Mundic.
Yeah.
And Mundic is almost like a ghost in the novel. He haunts
Yes.
He haunts the novel, and we never quite know what's in his mind or what he's going to do. But I was going to read a bit of Mundic.
That's a really good.
And then I was going to ask you about how he came into being and where the name came from, because there's a very interesting story about the name. So Mundic is originally interviewed to be Marjorie's assistant.
Yes, yes. So when Marjorie gets this idea to cross to the other side of the world, it being 1950, she knows she needs an assistant. So she advertises, as any sensible woman would, for a French-speaking assistant to travel to the other side of the world. And she has a few applicants. She has one who can't spell, turns out to be Enid Pretty, that she just dismisses offhand, but she interviews the others. One of them is this man.
Mundic. And when he doesn't get the job,
no,
I mean, we shouldn't say too much.
We can't say too much.
We shouldn't say too much. But anyway, this is a little bit of Mundic when he's stowed away on a ship.
Yes.
It was the blonde he didn't like. He didn't trust her. It wasn't just because she got the job instead of him. It was something else. He knew a trickster when he saw one. He followed her onto the ship, but she swung round sometimes sharp, as if she knew he was on her trail, and she didn't drop clues like Miss Benson did. He had a special page for her in his notebook, and so far all it said was, Enid Pretty. He wasn't even convinced that that was her real name. Mundic had managed to stay a few nights in a hiding place on the RMS Orion. No food, but he got used to that. In Burma, he survived for weeks on a bit of rice, and not white rice, but yellow stuff that was crawling with weevils. On the Orion, if he needed water, he crept out from the tarp and had taken some from the tap. But then a couple of boilermen had found him, and he thought it was all over. Hey! He turned to run, but he hadn't a chance. He was still weak, even after 5 years of freedom. They'd come after him and pulled him back. You could go to prison for this. There was no point in fighting. He'd thrown a punch, but it barely landed. He reckoned one of the chaps had been a prisoner of war. It was a thing that had happened since the war. You knew who'd been one and who hadn't, and the chaps who hadn't got caught looked down on the ones who had, like they weren't real men. Well, that was another thing that had happened since the war. The two boilermen had walked away to talk it over. He heard them arguing about what to do. One said they'd have to turn him in, but the older chap said, no, I'm not going to do that. Look at him. You've heard about these camps, haven't you? You've heard about how many of them died. It's a crime the way they've been left to fend for themselves. The one who wanted to turn him in had left, and the other had come over and said Mundic would be okay. No one would grass on him, but he needed to keep his head down and stay out of trouble. He held out his hands as he said it, like Mundic was a cornered dog. So Mundic, the name, it's a very interesting origin, how you came up with the name of this kind of wasted man.
Yes. It's Mundic is the waste. Bricks were created out of it from the waste from tin mines.
Tin mines.
And they are now that they're considered to be sort of cancerous bricks, because they crumble, and if a house is built of Mundic, it's liable to fall down and deteriorate. So it's a very unstable substance, and yet building bricks have been made of it.
So you can't really, it can't really hold its shape.
No.
And that's very much how the character is not stable.
No, he's not at all stable. No. And when I originally wrote him, because I remember I showed you page after page, I was always showing you pages, and I couldn't, it was just this tiny chapter where he was supposed to come for an interview for the job. I mean, half a page maybe.
Yeah.
Not really get the job, behave a little bit.
He started off as a bit of a kind of beefy guy, didn't he?
Yes, and he got smaller and smaller.
Then he got smaller and smaller, and then
yes.
he just got more and more kind of wiry and hard.
Malnourished.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, and his clothes don't really fit him properly. Anyway, I just kept thinking, this is this is a walk on part. He really shouldn't be taking up this much space in the book. And yet every time I tried to cut him down, he just sort of resisted in some way. So one day I just got up really, really early and I thought, well, what would it be like if I gave him a bit of my attention? Where would I go with that? And it seemed quite fruitful, because often if you're going on an adventure, you know, you're looking at the classic structures, you're being chased. There is something at your heels. And for Marjorie and Enid, there were a few things at their heels, but I thought, oh, it would be quite interesting if there is some shadowy force after them that actually bears some similarities to Marjorie in many ways, you know, but Marjorie is a woman who's capable of change and he is not. But it did strike me that he was a man who refused to accept that the book wasn't about him.
Yes, that's what I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe they were going on the journey without him. So
no.
he just kept himself in the book.
Yes, and he couldn't believe I was writing the book without him.
No. But
he wasn't supposed to be there originally. It was supposed to be simply women.
But he's the bit that I find interesting about him is that is what he represents about masculinity. Yeah. Because after the war, and you know, the book is after 2 wars.
Yes.
And the after effect of that is still, you could say, is still reverberating now.
Yeah.
You know, we really dealt with all the losses of what people went through, and I really getting that reading ready. I really was struck by that line. After 5 years of freedom, he was still like that. You think this is never going to go away?
No.
That trauma is never really going to pass.
No. And I suppose, what are we, 2 generations down now? Yeah. We may be carrying the ghosts.
Yeah, he is a ghost of that.
Yeah, he is.
Now, I know we've got to do questions in it, but the book is also very funny.
Oh yes, it is. Yes.
It is very funny.
Yes.
And what made me laugh was there's a bit in it where Marjorie is going to sleep in a hammock.
Oh yes.
And I remember you saying to me, I've got to get her in a hammock, and it's got to be, I want it to be funny. And she falls out of a hammock. Sorry, it's a bit of a spoiler. It's not that big a spoiler.
No.
A woman falls out of a hammock. But I remember you practicing falling out of a hammock.
Well, I was trying to get into the hammock is actually what happened. I wasn't trying to fall out, but it did strike me how easy it was to fall out. But you will remember I was also doing it in the middle of the night.
Yes. I couldn't see.
No. So because we happened to be staying somewhere that was quite hot with a hammock is the kind of detail that you might need for this story. So I did creep out in the middle of the night and attempt to get into the hammock, and I did just launch myself straight over the other side. Yeah. I couldn't see a thing.
So you've done extensive hammock research.
I've done extensive Beetle research, New Caledonia research, 1950s research, but also hammock.
Yeah. I was reading, there was a review that came out, a very good review of your book, that said that one of the things it said in it was that you were partly responsible for a new genre of fiction called uplit. Now, I think that means literature that's up.
That's happy. Yes, good.
Happy. Yeah. Now, I don't want to kind of tread on your toes, but knowing you as I do,
yes,
you are very attuned to some of the sadder.
Yeah.
You notice suffering and sorrow and despair.
Yeah.
It's an interesting mix that you've now become. I'm going to say the queen of uplit.
No, that would possibly be.
There probably is a queen.
I think there may be a queen. I don't think
I don't know who that is.
No.
But it's an interesting. I don't know. It's an interesting tension.
It is.
In you. I think,
yes, maybe.
Your writing.
Yes. I mean, I do see that kind of darkness, and I do see suffering in people, and I think it's what moves me.
But I was going to. If I ever bump my head.
Yes. Sorry.
If I ever bump my head, I know the first thing you're going to do. I don't mean that you're not very nice. You laugh.
I know.
Because you can't bear. You love the slapstick of it.
I do. I don't know why I find slapstick so funny. I find slapstick funny long after everybody else has stopped laughing. What's the song in the musical? Is it in Singing? No, what is it? Where? Oh,
Make them laugh.
yes.
Him singing in the rain.
Yes.
Yeah.
That gets me every time.
Yeah.
So I must have that in me that I remember when, this is ages and ages ago now, but when Anton Rogers was playing Harold Fry on the radio.
Yes.
The thing that really moved me about him was that he made me really, really laugh and then really sad within the space of very little time. And I find that a very interesting place to write, you know, where you bring people to a place that is hilarious, I mean, verging on kind of farce.
Yeah.
And then you pull it round to something either very ordinary or very beautiful or very sad, but that you kind of, I find it very fruitful to go into that place where the two kind of, they coexist.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a very dramatic
No, I
place.
think it's very nuanced, and it's enjoyable.
It is enjoyable, and it also means as a reader you're constantly being, you know, you're being played with a bit, but things don't become simply funny or simply sad or kind of full of sentiment, that you keep, you know, twisting it, turning it.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask one more thing before we go to questions from you all. But it's something that I think is really important right now in terms of, you know, where we are in the world, that we have all been locked down and we've all been asked to stay close to where we are. And I suddenly thought the book is so much about women returning to nature.
Yes.
It really struck me. I thought that was going on in you.
Yes.
All the way through the writing, that they have to immerse themselves in the natural world in order to find themselves.
Yes.
And it feels very relevant to right now.
Yes. Yes. No, I think it's true. I think it was very much in my mind. I mean, I think it's often in my mind. I mean, not only that, I mean, I think they have to endure. I think the thing is that often to find straightforward. And there's some suffering.
Yeah. I'm going to look at some questions.
Oh, yes.
Which there are some here. And I'm going to read them out. So I have a question from Libby Page. It says, it's really interesting hearing you talk together. It sounds like your writing process is quite collaborative. Can you talk a little more about this? Is your husband your first writer? Do you bounce ideas around with your agent editor too? How much do you see writing as a solitary versus collaborative process?
Okay, so we can talk about this in a way, can't we? We can answer this together.
One of my questions was going to be, Miss Benson's Beetle has the most amazing twist.
Yes.
Was that my idea? I think it was my idea. No, I think it was my idea.
No, I think I said to you, what would I do? ... And you said.
But you always like to come up with something that really twists something, don't you?
Yes, I do. I like a well-earned twist. You can't have a twist if you haven't earned it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love with a book when you've got to the stage where the telling, and that is a little way down when you've got the kind of map down. In terms of writing, I think that I give you a lot to read before anybody else sees it. So, I mean, not everything and not every day.
No.
And the other truth is, when you're writing, I think your head is kind of, half of you is permanently with it. It's very hard to switch off.
It's like you go into your workspace, you incubate, and then you come up for air in the evenings, don't you?
Yeah.
And I'd read, and then you'd go back down.
I mean, I can be quite joking and funny as well.
You can be very joking and funny, especially when I hurt myself.
Yes.
But
just in terms of a collaborative process, I still believe that actually, as a writer, it's in you, the story. I mean, you need help, you know, along the way. But I think the truth of the story is always in the writer of that particular story.
Yes.
And I think pulling it out is sometimes incredibly painful or dull. Or,
As an observer of the process, I'm often very glad I'm not in it.
Yes.
Because I just think, oh my God, that just sounds horrendous. You know, when you come back and you've got nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and that is, you're so despondent. And I just think, well, I'm reading it. I mean, I'm saying that works, that doesn't work. And but then you go into another process with your editor, don't you?
Yes. Yes, you do. Yes.
You know, then there's a whole nother kind of in-depth
energy.
Energy.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
So do I.
I've got a question from Michael Amos. At the beginning, you talked about the period you had set in post-war World War II. I think that the post-COVID, the world faces similar problems: disrupted families, economic difficulties, new ways of interaction, and unspent grief. Have you been struck by the similarities?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't something, obviously, because I began writing this 3-4 years ago, it obviously wasn't something that was even in my thinking, but I can really see similarities and resonances now between the two periods. And that sense as well that after the Second World War, initially that everything was going to change, you know, it was all going to be better. And then everybody having to deal with the really grim reality of, as you say, displaced families, lost families, lost love, no money, rationing. I mean, you know, no homes. I was really struck when I was doing my research by the detail of men who'd come back from the war and were given, civvies, so basically somebody else's suit. Mm. But how that would feel as a man when you come back from war and you try and settle back into, normal life again, having gone through whatever it is you've gone through, whatever you've seen, and then somebody gives you a suit that belonged to somebody else that doesn't probably quite fit you.
Well, you're not your own man, are you?
No.
If you're in someone else's suit.
Exactly. So yes, I mean, I think there are a lot of similarities, and it makes me really glad that I've written a book that actually is about pushing against that, and a kind of, a reminder of how extraordinary the world is and how we must look after it. I mean, part of the thing about my research into beetles and meeting so many entomologists as I did, what really struck me was them saying, we have to find out what we have in the world before it's too late, before we've lost it. Because if we don't know what we've lost, we don't know what we've had, and then we can't see where we're going and we can't save it. I was really struck by that.
That's interesting. There's another question. I hope that's okay, Michael. Hi, Rachel. Do you do the research first or as you go along or as the novel evolves? That's from Annalise.
I would say I spend a long time before I really begin to commit to writing, doing research. And I researched really, really broadly and widely, which is the same thing, for this one, because I was, not only did I not know about beetles or 1950, or New Caledonia, but I didn't know about even how you would get there. So there was so much to find out. All kind of the holding camps when you got to Brisbane, because so many people were trying to go to emigrating to Australia. So there was all that to find out about. And in fact, this is a bit sideways, but one of the great things that happened, where's the book gone? Was that we were clearing out Paul's dad's house and came across a letter. And this was just at the point when I was really trying to research how you would get just to New Caledonia, which it turns out is by boat from Tilbury to Brisbane. And we were clearing at the house, and I was really lost in that bit trying to find it. And then I'm going to hold up this letter that we found in Paul's dad's house, which is, I don't know if you can see it, but it's probably back to front, isn't it? It's basically a letter. The title is 21st of February 1956, SS Orion, left Tilbury after PM in a blizzard. And it's about his travels on the boat to Brisbane. So that was one of those moments when you just think,
yeah, something's leading you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I would say, in answer to the question, after my long kind of roundabout way, that I do a lot of research before, and then I try and put it to one side, but I do continue to research as I go, because obviously little things come up that you realise you don't know about, and I'm interested.
Brilliant. And that was from Ainsley. Sorry, I didn't read your name properly, Ainsley. I do apologise. I have a question from Matthew Coulson. Listening to extracts from the book, I'm eagerly anticipating the arrival of my copy. Whilst I'm waiting, based on what you read when you were preparing for the Beetle, what one book would you recommend?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, it depends how interested you are in Beetles, really. I got very interested in Beetles, and there's a little, it's one of those small books in the series that's about animals. So there was one called Wolf, and there is one called Beetle, and I think it might be by Adam Hodder, but that would be non-fiction, which I did find interesting. Yeah, I think that's a good starting place.
Yeah. There's a question about the music shop.
Huh?
Maybe we can do that towards the end. We want to
or we can just go to the music shop very quickly. Yeah?
Go quickly to the music shop. This is from Susan Mann. Are you really as knowledgeable about music as your hero in the music shop, or did you have people to advise you? That's from Susan Mann.
Okay. So yeah, well, I did a lot of research again about music, because if you're going to write a book about a man who knows everything about music, it struck me I needed to find out a lot about music. And while I do love music, I'm not a musician, and I'm not really very good at expressing why I love it. You are a huge music fan, and so again, we did a lot of this research together. Yes, but you, yeah. I mean, you had what we came from different places with music, didn't we? So I was more kind of classical, and you were more
K-pop.
K-pop, yes, exactly. So I did a huge amount of research, and then it got to the point where I'd done so much research, I had no book. I just had, I just listened to way too much and read way too much, and I was a little bit in awe of my research. And at that point, I did what Frank does in the music shop, and I just put on headphones and I started to just really listen. And then I tried to capture through words what the music did to me as a person. And that kind of felt like the turning point for the book, when I stopped trying to write it as an expert and wrote it as somebody who really responds to music and wants to understand why.
Yeah. I mean, also it's Frank's view of music.
Yes.
It's not the definitive.
No.
So it's songs that he's a musical chemist, isn't he?
He is.
So he gives people prescriptions almost.
Yes.
That are pieces of music that have something in it that he thinks will heal them.
Yes.
But which I think is what we get from music a bit, isn't it?
Yes.
It matches your pain, or it matches your up feeling.
Yes. Yes. And it all began with that visit to the music shop.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. There was a music shop in Cheltenham.
Yes, you can tell that story.
Well, yes, I couldn't sleep for some reason or other. This is a long time ago, and I thought maybe it would help if I had something really soothing to listen to as I went to sleep. And I went to a little tiny classical music shop in Cheltenham, which is not there anymore. And I said to the man in the shop, who was a bit like a Mr. Ben kind of character. I don't know if anyone remembers Mr. Ben in the shop. And he said, I said, I'm really having trouble sleeping. Have you got anything that would help? And he went, well, let me look. And he went back and he got something and he put it on and he played it in the shop. And then I said, that's going to work. Yeah, I said, that's going to work. And then another man said, I can't sleep. I can't sleep. Can I have that as well? So everybody kind of quickly wanted, it was like a kind of potion, if you like.
Yeah.
Just going to make sure we keep up with our questions.
Okay.
Samba,
you've missed Anna.
Anna. Oh, Anna. Greetings from Florida. What is the core message of this novel without spoiling the journey of the characters?
Well, I'd say it is Marjorie wants to find a beetle. Enid wants to have a baby. They realize that when they accomplish those things, and whatever the journey is to get to those things, they will fulfill something inside them. And I don't mean kind of live your dream or go girl. I mean that it's to do with vocation. It's to do with the thing that you need to do to be the person, the person you want to be or need to be. And I think a lot about vocation because I think a lot about writing, and I think a lot about how it's something I need to do, and how also it's something that if I ignored, I think would kind of not hurt me in some way, but I think it's how else to express it. It's part of who I am, and if I turn my back on it, it would not be good for me. And that is true for Marjorie, and it's true for Enid. And I think probably for me, that's the message of the book.
Yeah. They have to come together, don't they?
They do, and Marjorie has to find the Enid inside her, and Enid has to find the Marjorie inside her. To become complete, they have to, I suppose you would say, they have to reconcile their opposites.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a question from Sam Burr. Do you have any advice for first-time novelists who are stuck in the middle of their first draft like me? I adored The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry and couldn't believe it was your first book. I'm so looking forward to devouring Miss Benson's Beetle.
Yeah, I mean, I think just keep going. That's what I'd say, wouldn't you? I mean, it's so hard. I think that's the thing that people don't talk about with writing, especially writing your first book. You haven't done it before. You don't know that you can do it. And nobody else probably. I mean, maybe, you have friends, family who are saying you can do it, but it's really you against the universe is how it sometimes feels, trying to prove that you can do it. But just as I would say to Marjorie, go and find your beetle, and Enid, go and try and find a way of having this baby, I would say, if it is in you, this need to write this book, you must do it. And that means you must stay with it, and there will be times when it really doesn't feel a very good idea and you don't even like it very much. But you mustn't be unkind to it, and you mustn't be unkind to yourself, and you must forgive, I think, all your mistakes, because that's just inevitable that we will make masses and masses of mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, in observing it, I would say to Sam, what I observe in Rachel is that there's a point where it really looks like it's not going to work and it's all going to come apart. It's absolutely no good. It's absolutely for the rubbish tip. And I think writers, I think that's what maybe separates writers from other people, is that they somehow push through that. Yeah. And it's a really horrible barrier to go through. But I think they just keep going, and there's something in them that just pushes through that horrible feeling where the feeling says stop. But there's something, try and find the bit, you have to try and find the bit of you that perseveres and goes through the despair in a way. Yes.
I think it's to do with, you know that you're a writer. You know that there's a little flame in you that says that you're a writer. So feed that flame, and don't give up on it.
Yeah, that's good advice. I'm fascinated by, this is from Amy Markov Johnson. I'm fascinated by the lovely bookshelves behind you. It's a set, Amy. It's not real. While writing, do you put aside research reading and read for pleasure as well? If so, what kinds of things do you read while writing Miss Benson's Beetle, and how did that inform the book? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. And I think you have to be so careful when you're in the thick of writing a book about reading. I mean, I love reading, and we have books everywhere. This is just a small, I mean, we have way too many books for any one person to read in a lifetime, and I still keep buying them. but I have to be very careful when I'm writing because it's quite a porous thing, writing. And I think when you read another book, it's very easy to start feeling the energy of the other book, especially when the other book is fully formed and yours isn't. To kind of want to kind of just tease some bits out of the other book and have them in yours. So I am very careful. Having said that, I try to go to voices that I feel comfortable with, that I respect, that have, I mean, I wouldn't for one moment say that I would be in their space, but that speak to me in some way. So I would always look at Penelope Fitzgerald, Alice Munro. I would look at Elizabeth Strout, Anne Tyler. I've now gone blank. I mean, there are so many. But one writer I did discover during lockdown, and I'm ashamed that it's taken me so long to discover her, is Anne Patchett. And I thought The Dutch House was phenomenal. I was very glad I'd finished. I didn't have a book to write when I read it because I could just completely enjoy it, and I could enjoy how brilliant it is. And then during lockdown, reading Bel Canto. And that was about the first book. There was a period which so many people went through where I could read, but I couldn't settle in a book. And Bel Canto, I absolutely was just kind of overwhelmed by, and I'm really happy to go into that space.
I mean, you're always reading.
Yes, I am. I think as a writer, you have to keep reading. You must, because you need to see how other people are doing it. But it's just that stage, when your own writing is very fragile, you just have to be a little bit mindful of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're reading, I mean, you do often say, "Oh, this is so good."
Yes.
You're often in awe of things.
Yes.
The beauty of a novel.
I am.
And I suppose observing, I think you've got to do your thing.
Yes. Yes.
I think it must be difficult.
I mean, non-fiction is a good place to go when I'm writing, and I enjoyed. I mean, Rebecca Solnit, I always find.
Yes, you really liked
so much.
You read her a lot, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and I read a lot of Evelyn Cheeseman, who was a 1950s entomologist who wanted to be an entomologist, but this was at the turn of the 20th century, couldn't even go to veterinary school, being a woman, and ended up kind of somehow getting her way into the Natural History Museum and starting their collection after the First World War, I think it was, just by finding her own specimens, and then started funding her own trips to the Southwest Pacific. So she did briefly go to New Caledonia, though that wasn't her big area. But she was the most, I mean, she traveled alone. She funded everything herself. And she went to islands that a lot of people had never been to before. And she wouldn't be stopped by the fact that she was a woman, or by other men, or by the fact it was extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And then she funded it all by just writing. And I think sometimes she just, I'll just do a book, it'll sell, and then I can go again. But she tells one story about being caught in a spider's web, but not just like, a little spider's web. I mean, like curtains and curtains of spider's web. And her only way out was to use her nail file. That was how she saved her life. But after that, she bought a machete.
Yes, you mustn't ever confuse a nail file with a machete.
No, you mustn't.
That's just, I should say that,
yes,
in case anybody, for health and safety, yeah. There's a picture you've got, which I think is quite interesting. While we're talking about
inspiration.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, I don't know whether this is going to reflect madly, but this, it is a bit. I'm trying to do this one. These two women, I didn't find them right at the beginning, but I did find them quite early on. I'll just go closer for you. And they were an inspiration, partly because I look at this, every time I look at it, I just go, aren't you two great? And partly because this is May Morris, the daughter of William Morris, and her companion, Mary Lobb. They were obviously very different women, to show you again, you've got May kind of with sort of staring off to one side, and then Mary staring straight at the camera in her marvelous breeches and jacket and tie. But what so moves me about this photograph is how, standing together, they're able to be the women that they truly are, so that May, who is the artistic one, is able to look off a little to one side and maybe to think whatever it is she's thinking, whereas Mary stares at the camera full on.
Hmm.
So I think we've just got time for
Maybe one more question.
Yes.
We have a question from Francis Gardner. In the piece that you read from at the beginning of the book, you mentioned a book called Incredible Creatures. Is that a real book or did you make it up? I hope not, as I'd like to see a copy.
I made it up. I made it up.
There is a book.
There is a marvellous book.
French book.
Yes. Yes, that we found, which is...
That's got mermen.
Yes, yes, that was a bit of an inspiration. Yes, which is it's published by a French company, and I don't think it's even Deyrolle. It's Deyrolle, and I can't remember what the name of the book is, but it's a French book, and it is just it's illustrations brilliantly.
They're magical, aren't
yes, coloured inspirations of painted with kind of wings, and they're all kind of fantastical creatures. So my book the book that Marjorie sees as a child is made up, but I say it was inspired by the Deyrolle book.
And in fact, we went to a place in Paris, the Deyrolle. Was it the Deyrolle?
Oh, yes, that's such a strange place.
There's a place in Paris which is like a kind of, it's full of...
I thought there were going to be more beetles there. That was why we went, and it was
lots of stuffed animals.
Yeah, it was very weird. Yeah, it was a bit spooky, really.
Yeah, kind of macabre, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, have we got time for one more question?
Oh, there's a very quick one from Charlotte. Looking forward to reading the book. Has being in lockdown affected your writing process or perhaps inspired you? I'm going to answer this really, really quickly because I think at the beginning of lockdown, I thought that it would be just really easy for me because basically I live in a state of lockdown. I mean, when I'm writing, I'm just at home writing. I just didn't see where the difference would be. But I found it really unsettling. And I think for lots of people, but for lots of creative people I've spoken to, and I think it's because in order to go into your imagination, you normally are in some sort of place of peace. I mean, or kind of something regular in order to go into something that's irregular, your imagination. And I was so kind of overwhelmed by the anxiety in the world that I found I couldn't concentrate for very long at all. So it's not really been a very creative time. But it has been a thoughtful time.
Mm. I mean, there was a question earlier on, wasn't there, about, what effects it's going to have?
Yes.
And I guess we don't know.
No. And then maybe you have to live with that.
You've got to probably...
But living with not knowing is quite an uncertain thing.
Yeah.
An unsettling thing.
Yeah, no, it's really difficult.
At this point, we should do something funny, shouldn't we? Like you should hit your head or something.
I should bang my head, yeah. I could do some stunt work, but that doesn't really seem appropriate.
No.
But I was going to say to you, just before we stop, having seen you do all your novels, I suppose, this is a really amazing achievement. I mean, I probably haven't said that to you because I'm reading it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, because I've been looking at it again just to ask you questions. I mean, in a way, it is your most complete novel, I think. I mean, it is very, it contains so much, and it is epic. It does contain so much, and I think that is an amazing achievement. So I really hope that you do enjoy it, and the people who like your work and people who don't know your work buy it, because I think it's really important to read. I think especially about women, and where women go in the future, and how this develops. It's an ongoing process, a very important one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Paul.
We didn't have any tea or cake.
No, we forgot.
Yeah.
But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.